Is the ice cream in your freezer actually ice cream, or is it something else entirely? Here's a question most people never think to ask. When you scoop that vanilla into a bowl, when you hear the spoon scrape against the carton, when you take that first bite and feel the cold hit your tongue, are you eating real dairy ice cream made from cream and milk? Or are you eating a carefully engineered frozen product designed to look like ice cream while quietly cutting every possible corner? Because over the last 20 years, something strange has happened in the American ice cream aisle. Brands that families trusted for generations didn't disappear. They didn't rebrand. They didn't announce sweeping changes. Instead, they stayed right where they were, same logos, same colors, same nostalgia, while slowly swapping out real ingredients for cheaper substitutes. Cream became optional, milk fat quietly dropped. Air content went up, and in some cases, the product legally stopped qualifying as ice cream at all. I didn't notice this at first either. Most people don't. You assume that if it's in the ice cream freezer, and it looks like ice cream, and it tastes close enough, then it must be ice cream. But after weeks of reading ingredient labels, digging through food regulations, comparing milk fat percentages, and tracking how recipes have changed over time, a very different picture starts to emerge. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with one of the most shocking examples. Breyers might be the most successful illusion in the American freezer aisle. For decades, Breyers built its reputation on one simple idea: natural, real, wholesome. Their marketing leaned heavily on imagery of fresh milk, vanilla beans, and simple ingredients. Many people still associate Breyers with the idea that it's somehow cleaner or more honest than other big brands. But here's the uncomfortable truth. A large number of Breyers flavors sold in the United States today are no longer legally classified as ice cream. That's not opinion. That's labeling law. Under US standards, ice cream must contain a minimum amount of milk fat. When a product falls below that threshold, manufacturers are required to stop calling it ice cream. That's why you'll now see Breyers cartons labeled as frozen dairy dessert instead. That wording isn't marketing. It's a legal downgrade. So what changed? Milk fat dropped. Cream was reduced, and in many formulations, vegetable oils were introduced to replace what used to come naturally from dairy. Vegetable oil is cheaper. It's more shelf-stable. And when combined with stabilizers and emulsifiers, it can mimic the mouthfeel of cream just well enough that most consumers don't immediately notice. But your body notices. Vegetable oils freeze differently than milk fat. They leave a slightly waxy coating on the tongue. They melt faster. And they don't carry flavor the same way real cream does. To compensate, more sugar and flavoring is added. Then air is whipped aggressively into the mixture to create volume. This is where the carton becomes deceptive. Pick up a Breyers tub and feel how light it is. That lightness isn't generosity, it's overrun. The amount of air pumped into the product. More air means less actual food per scoop. You're not buying a full carton of ice cream. You're buying a carefully engineered foam designed to look full. What makes this particularly effective is that Breyers didn't abandon its identity. The packaging still whispers, classic. The flavors still sound simple. And unless you flip the carton over and read the fine print, you'd never know that the product inside isn't what it used to be. This isn't a small change. It's a fundamental one. Bluebell occupies a very different emotional space. If Breyers is associated with simplicity, Bluebell is associated with loyalty. In many parts of the United States, especially in the South, Bluebell isn't just ice cream. It's tradition. It's community. It's the brand people defend instinctively because it feels personal. That's what makes the ingredient list so surprising. Bluebell's branding leans hard into the idea of homemade quality, old-fashioned recipes, creamy textures, a sense that nothing about it has changed. But when you look past the storytelling and into the formulation, you start to see modern industrial shortcuts hiding behind the nostalgia. Corn syrup appears in multiple flavors. Mono and diglycerides are used to stabilize texture. Carrageenan shows up as a thickener. These aren't ingredients you'd ever use if you were making ice cream in your kitchen. They're ingredients used to control cost, extend shelf life, and standardize texture across massive production runs. One of the more subtle changes is how Bluebell manages cream usage. While cream is present, it's often not the dominant dairy ingredient. Milk solids and stabilizers do a lot of the heavy lifting. This allows the product to remain creamy even when the actual fat content is lower than consumers assume. There's also the texture issue. True dairy-rich ice cream has weight. When you scoop it, there's resistance. When it melts, it does so slowly and evenly. Many consumers have noticed that modern Bluebell melts faster and feels softer than it used to. That's not your imagination. That's formulation. What's fascinating is how effectively the brand story overrides the ingredient reality. People don't read the label because they trust the name. And that trust has allowed gradual changes to go largely unnoticed. Bluebell didn't become bad overnight. It slowly drifted away from what made it special, and relied on emotional loyalty to cover the distance. Magnum sells indulgence. Not nostalgia, not simplicity, indulgence. Every Magnum commercial is designed to make you feel like you're buying something luxurious. Thick chocolate shell, rich vanilla core, slow motion bites. The suggestion that this is ice cream for adults with refined taste. But Magnum isn't a boutique brand. It's owned by one of the largest food conglomerates on Earth, and its ingredient strategy reflects that reality. The base of many Magnum products starts with skim milk or milk solids rather than cream. Vegetable fats are used to support texture and mouthfeel. Emulsifiers derived from palm oil help bind everything together and keep the product stable through shipping and storage. This matters because when cream isn't doing the work, something else has to. Vegetable fats don't behave like dairy fat. They don't melt the same way. They don't carry flavor the same way. So the formulation compensates. More sugar, stronger flavorings, a thicker chocolate coating to distract from what's underneath. That chocolate shell is doing more than adding flavor. It's masking. Magnum charges premium prices, but the product beneath the shell is closer to a mass-produced frozen dessert than true premium ice cream. The luxury is in the presentation, not the dairy. This is one of the most effective marketing strategies in the freezer aisle. Distract the consumer with a high-quality exterior while quietly economizing the core. And it works. Häagen-Dazs and Breyers are interesting because they represent something uniquely American, the illusion of abundance. These are the ice creams that dominate entire freezer doors. Giant cartons, family sizes, bright colors. The unspoken promise is simple. You're getting a lot for your money. And technically, that's true. You are getting a lot of volume. What you're not getting is a lot of ice cream. The key concept here is overrun. Overrun is the amount of air whipped into ice cream during production. All ice cream contains some air. That's normal. But industrial brands like Häagen-Dazs and Breyers push this to the limit. The result is a product that looks massive, feels light, and melts incredibly fast. Pick up a carton and compare it to a premium brand. The difference is obvious. One feels dense, the other feels almost hollow. That air isn't free. It's doing a job. It allows manufacturers to use less dairy, less cream, and less milk fat per serving. To keep the texture stable, the formulation leans heavily on stabilizers and emulsifiers, ingredients designed to control ice crystal formation and prevent collapse as the product melts. Corn syrup solids play a big role here. They're cheaper than sugar, they bind water efficiently, and they enhance sweetness without contributing the richness that cream provides. This is why many people describe Häagen-Dazs or Breyers as sweet but thin. It hits your tongue quickly, then disappears. There's also the ingredient hierarchy. In higher quality ice cream, cream appears first. In Häagen-Dazs and Breyers, you'll often see milk, skim milk, or milk solids listed before cream. That's not accidental, it's a cost structure. Turkey Hill might be the most misleading brand on this list, not because it's the worst, but because of how carefully it cultivates a wholesome image. The name itself evokes farms, pastures, rolling hills, fresh milk. It feels local, even when it's not, and that feeling carries enormous weight in consumer perception. But Turkey Hill's formulations tell a different story. Corn syrup is a consistent presence. Stabilizers and emulsifiers are standard. Cream is used, but not generously. Like many mid-tier brands, Turkey Hill relies on milk solids and processing techniques to simulate richness rather than building it naturally from fat. This creates a very specific texture profile. Soft, easy to scoop straight from the freezer, quick to melt, pleasant at first bite, then gone. What's especially notable is how Turkey Hill balances flavor. Because the dairy base is thinner, flavorings have to work harder. This leads to stronger vanilla notes, sweeter chocolate profiles, and more aggressive add-ins. The ice cream becomes a delivery system for flavor rather than the star itself. This isn't inherently evil, but it's not what the branding suggests. Consumers often assume Turkey Hill sits closer to traditional ice cream than it actually does. In reality, it occupies a carefully calculated middle ground. Affordable enough to compete with store brands, familiar enough to feel trustworthy, and processed enough to scale nationally. The farm imagery does a lot of heavy lifting. By this point, a pattern should be emerging. The problem isn't that ice cream companies exist to make money. The problem is that many of them rely on consumer ignorance to quietly downgrade quality without losing trust. So how do you protect yourself? Start with the ingredient order. Ingredients are listed by weight. If cream isn't at or near the top, you're not looking at a cream-forward product. Check the milk fat percentage if it's listed. Real ice cream has weight. It has density. Low-fat formulations rely on stabilizers to compensate, and you can taste the difference. Pay attention to how the product melts. Ice cream made with real cream melts slowly and evenly. Products built on water and stabilizers collapse quickly. Lift the carton. This sounds simple, but it works. If a large container feels suspiciously light, that's air. Air is not an ingredient you should be paying for. And finally, look for vegetable oils. Ice cream doesn't need them. Their presence is a cost-saving measure, not a quality one. Häagen-Dazs is proof that scale doesn't automatically destroy quality, but only if a company actively resists the shortcuts. What makes Häagen-Dazs different isn't that it's perfect. It's that it's stubborn. While many large brands quietly replaced cream with vegetable fats and padding agents, Häagen-Dazs largely refused to follow that path. If you read the ingredient list on a classic Häagen-Dazs flavor, you'll notice something immediately. It's short. Cream is front and center. Milk follows. Sugar is present, but not overwhelming. Eggs appear in many flavors, which is a traditional ice cream technique used to improve texture naturally, rather than through stabilizers. That egg yolk matters. It provides emulsification the old-fashioned way, allowing fat and water to bind without synthetic helpers. This is why Häagen-Dazs ice cream feels heavier, denser, and slower to melt. It's not filled with air to inflate volume. It relies on fat content and technique. Another detail people overlook is mouthfeel. Real dairy fat coats the tongue differently. It carries flavor longer. It melts at body temperature, not instantly. When people say Häagen-Dazs tastes richer, they're not imagining it. They're responding to physics. Is Häagen-Dazs a health food? No. It's still ice cream. But it's honest ice cream. It doesn't pretend to be light while secretly engineering around missing fat. It doesn't rely on vegetable oils to simulate cream. And it doesn't disguise itself as something it isn't. In a freezer aisle full of illusions, consistency is rare. That's why Häagen-Dazs stands out. Tillamook's story begins in a place most industrial brands try to simulate through marketing: real dairy country. Unlike many national brands owned by distant conglomerates, Tillamook operates as a farmer-owned cooperative. That structure matters more than people realize. When the people supplying the milk also have a stake in the final product, cost-cutting becomes a lot harder to justify. Tillamook ice cream leans heavily on cream, actual cream, as a foundational ingredient. You can feel it when you scoop it. The texture is firm but smooth. It doesn't collapse instantly. It doesn't feel whipped or hollow. Another important difference is restraint. Tillamook doesn't chase extreme softness straight out of the freezer. Many mass-market brands optimize their ice cream to be scoopable immediately, which requires stabilizers and air. Tillamook accepts that real ice cream needs a minute. That small inconvenience is actually a sign of integrity. You'll also notice fewer artificial tricks, no aggressive sweetness to compensate for missing fat, no heavy reliance on gums to fake richness. The flavors come from dairy first, add-ins second. This is what happens when a brand doesn't need to disguise its base. Tillamook isn't boutique. It's widely available. It's well known. And it's one of the few large American brands that still behaves like a dairy company instead of a frozen dessert manufacturer. The American ice cream industry didn't collapse overnight, it slowly hollowed itself out. Brands kept their names, kept their logos, kept their shelf space. What changed was what they were willing to put inside the carton. Cream was replaced with oil. Density was replaced with air. Tradition was replaced with optimization. And most consumers were never told. Once you know what to look for, the illusion falls apart. And that's not a bad thing. It means you get to choose intentionally. Ice cream should be simple. It should be indulgent. It should be honest. And when it isn't, you deserve to know. Which brand shocked you the most? And if you want to see another breakdown like this, the next video is already waiting on your screen.